three friends, David, Mark, and Sam, set out early one cool autumn morning to fish at a secluded lake deep in the woods. The sun had just begun to rise, casting a soft golden glow through the dense trees as the fog clung to the earth, swirling around the branches like tendrils of smoke. It was the kind of quiet morning that made the world feel like it was holding its breath. They had been to the lake countless times before, always escaping the humdrum of everyday life to enjoy the peace of the forest. But today felt different. There was something about the air, thick with the scent of wet earth and pine, that made the hairs on the back of David's neck prickle. Still, he brushed off the feeling and smiled as Mark joked about the size of the fish they'd catch. They reached the lake by mid-morning, the mist thickening as they set up their gear on the bank. Sam, the most eager of the three, was the first to cast his line into the still water. "First one to catch a fish gets bragging rights for a year," he said with a grin, already pulling at his fishing rod. David and Mark settled into the rhythm of fishing, the peaceful silence stretching between them. The lake was eerily calm, the water so smooth it reflected the sky like a mirror. But as the hours passed, an uncomfortable quiet began to settle over them. No birds sang. No breeze stirred the trees. The only sound was the occasional splash of a fish jumping out of the water, though no one had caught anything for hours. As the sun began to dip lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the water, a thick fog began to creep in from the edge of the trees. It was unusual, too thick, too fast. Within minutes, the entire lake was shrouded in mist. The world seemed to shrink, closing in around them. David glanced around, a growing unease gnawing at his chest. "We should head back," he said, his voice tight. "This fog's getting worse. We don't want to be out here after dark." Mark nodded, his face pale. "Yeah, I don't like the look of this. We should go." But Sam, ever the adventurer, was determined. "We've been here all day. I'm not leaving without at least one fish. Just a few more minutes." David and Mark exchanged a glance, but neither argued. They stayed by the lake, the mist swirling around them, the air growing colder. The shadows seemed to deepen, the trees looming like dark sentinels. The world felt distorted, as though the lake and the woods were suspended in time. Then, without warning, Sam's fishing rod jerked violently. He let out a startled cry, reeling in the line with frenzied energy. "I've got something," he shouted, his voice laced with excitement and disbelief. David and Mark watched, their hearts racing, as Sam struggled to pull in whatever was on the other end. It was heavier than anything they had seen before, too heavy for a fish. Then, just as quickly as it had begun, the line snapped with a loud, harsh crack. Sam stumbled back, falling to the ground as the rod flew from his hands. The lake was silent again. The mist had thickened, swallowing the trees, the shore, and even the sound of their breathing. Sam stood up, his face pale. "What was that?" he muttered, his voice barely audible. David didn't know how to answer. His heart was pounding in his chest, and his instincts screamed that something was wrong, something was watching them from the mist. The air seemed too thick, too alive, as though the forest itself was breathing with them. "Let's go," Mark whispered urgently. He grabbed Sam by the arm, pulling him toward the path they had come in on. David followed, his every step feeling heavier than the last. But the fog closed in tighter. It was no longer a mist, they couldn't see anything beyond a few feet. The path was gone. They were lost. Time seemed to stretch, the fog pressing in on them from all sides. The sounds of the forest had disappeared entirely. No birds, no insects, not even the distant rustle of leaves. Only the oppressive silence. Then, as if from the very heart of the mist, came a faint sound, faint, but unmistakable. A low, throaty hum that seemed to vibrate through their bones. It was a sound they couldn't place, something ancient and unnerving. Suddenly, Sam stopped. "Did you hear that?" he asked, his voice trembling. David's breath caught in his throat as he turned to look at his friend. "Sam, we need to keep moving. Now." But Sam didn't listen. His eyes were wide, locked on something in the distance, something in the fog. David could see nothing, but Sam's gaze was fixed, his face pale, his lips trembling as though he were speaking to someone, or something. "Sam, come on," Mark called, grabbing him by the shoulder and trying to pull him away. But Sam resisted, his body rigid with fear. It's here. It's." Before anyone could react, a sharp, almost unnatural scream pierced the silence. It wasn't human, it didn't sound anything like a human scream. The sound came from the mist, surrounding them, echoing in every direction. Then, just as suddenly, it stopped. David turned to find Sam gone. "Sam!" Mark called out, his voice cracking with panic. They called his name, again and again, but there was no answer. The fog remained still, thick and suffocating. After what felt like hours of searching, David and Mark found themselves standing by the lake once more, their hearts heavy, their hands trembling. Sam was nowhere to be found. It was as if he had never existed at all. In the end, it was just the two of them, Mark and David, who made it back to the town. But even then, the mist followed them, lingering at the edge of the woods, an unspoken threat they couldn't shake. And though they never spoke of it again, neither of them ever returned to the lake. The forest, the fog, and the echo of that strange, terrifying scream were memories that haunted them both. They never spoke of Sam's disappearance, nor of what had happened in the mist, but they both knew, deep down, that some things were better left undisturbed. And as time passed, the woods whispered of the creature that waited, unseen, just beyond the veil of fog.